There are stories that start as tragedies but hold a twist so surprising, it changes forever the life of anyone who hears them. You're going to be stunned by this one. Elizabeth Carter grew up hearing she had everything going for her. Flawless report cards, debate medals, a notebook packed with plans to study law. At home, the routine felt solid: family dinners, promises of support, goals scribbled in her father's planner. Elizabeth believed if she just followed the map, a diploma would be waiting at the end. She collected recommendation letters and cut out scholarship notices, storing them all in a clear folder like someone guarding a promise. This channel is new and was created to share stories with life lessons, intense, filled with emotion and meaning, examples that will touch your heart and strengthen your mind. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video. At 21, the table where she'd learned to argue became the stage for an unappealable verdict. Her parents announced their separation in clean, almost clinical phrases, as if life could fit neatly into meeting minutes. Elizabeth put away the silverware, took a deep breath, and realized some silences weigh more than shouts. That night, her certainty about the future lost its footing. The next day, she opened her thesis file and stared at a blinking cursor like an impatient clock. The topic still made sense, but her body didn't keep up. She smiled in the hallways, answered, "I'm fine." Inside, she was spinning out of sync. At night, she pretended to study, rereading the same line dozens of times, as if her thoughts had lost their place. Small choices started adding up. She skipped an oratory practice and lost her spot in the tournament. A professor asked to talk with her. Elizabeth thanked him and avoided it. Days later, the cost of avoiding that conversation came due: her grade dropped a letter, her scholarship required a high GPA, and her margin shrank. The family, once united, fractured into separate schedules. Her father talked about adjustments, and his monthly support arrived late. Elizabeth sold 2 textbooks to pay for internet service, vowing to buy them back when things settled down. The next week, she sold another. The relief came like a sip of water, the thirst returned right after. She tried to organize the chaos. She scheduled an appointment with the campus counselor and arrived early, but canceled after receiving a text from her mom asking for a small favor. She went back to her room and wrote a long letter, with no recipient. On the last line, a confession that cost her, "I'm afraid I won't know who I am without the plan they gave me." She folded the page and tucked it into her case. A friend invited her to join a study group. Elizabeth went, laughed at a joke, read aloud, and almost recognized her own voice. For an hour, she remembered what it felt like to learn. When she left, she opened her banking app. Her balance was nearly zero. The future, once a straight road, now looked like an intersection with no signs. The email from the registrar arrived: performance below the minimum required to maintain your scholarship. Re-evaluation in 30 days. She left campus, sat on the bus stop bench, and thought about how the last few years had been reduced to other people's goals. For the first time, she accepted an uncomfortable idea: maybe she needed to pause before she broke completely. The next morning, she signed the form to withdraw. She turned in the paperwork, kept the receipt, and walked out. The hallway looked the same, the graduation photos still smiled the same way, but something essential had changed inside. Elizabeth took a breath and decided that before taking any other step, she needed to find her own voice. Elizabeth believed a change of scenery might be the answer. After withdrawing from college, she hastily packed a suitcase and headed to another city, with no destination beyond the hope of reinventing herself. It was as if she wanted to erase the past, trade the weight of expectations for a new identity. At first, the feeling of freedom seemed real. No one knew her, no one expected anything from her. It was during this time that she met Daniel, a former Marine with stories of travel, battles, and promises of adventure. He seemed to have answers to questions she'd been avoiding. There was an intensity in every word he spoke, as if life were always lived at the edge. To Elizabeth, this magnetism was seductive, a escape from the emptiness she carried. What she didn't immediately realize was that Daniel was also a prisoner of his own ghosts. Cocaine use was part of his routine, and slowly, it became part of hers too. The first time was almost a silent pact. Elizabeth wanted to feel something different, to push away, even briefly, the melancholy that hovered around her. The drug delivered exactly that, immediate relief, a false sense of strength and control. She laughed freely, for the first time in a long while. For a few days, she believed she'd found the missing key. But as her meetings with Daniel became more frequent, the shine of novelty faded into a dangerous cycle. The job she'd landed to support herself was the first to slip through her fingers. She started arriving late, forgetting deadlines, losing focus on simple tasks. When she was fired, she felt only a dull emptiness, as if it had been inevitable. The little money she had left went straight toward keeping that temporary feeling of relief alive. Bills piled up. Rent came due. Slowly, her dignity dissolved. Friends from before called, sent messages, tried to understand what was happening. Elizabeth avoided replying. Shame mixed with the urge to hide her reality. Her clothes grew worn, her reflection in the mirror heavier. The woman who once dreamed of defending causes in court disappeared into the illusion that one more dose would be enough to get through another day. In this quiet process, she stopped recognizing herself. The promise of freedom in the new city turned into an invisible prison. The young woman searching for a fresh start began to realize she'd become trapped by a relief that cost more and more, her health, her peace, her very identity. The years that followed fell on Elizabeth like an avalanche. Losing her job led to other losses, the apartment, the trust of the few friends still trying to help her, the minimal stability that held her life together. Soon, all that remained was a borrowed mattress, then a corner of someone's couch, until finally, the streets became her address. 5 years of forgetting passed. Every morning, she woke up not knowing where she'd sleep that night. She set up a small tent on an empty lot and took in a dog that showed up by chance. The animal became her companion, her reason to keep going one more day. Feeding him became a goal, even when she herself went hungry. In his eyes, she found a fragment of responsibility that still kept her standing. Arrests came as part of the cycle. First, for fraud, she'd tried using fake documents to get money. Second, for shoplifting. Third, after a poorly planned robbery with people she met on the street. Each time she walked out of jail, she swore to herself it would be the last. But addiction demanded its price, and relapses came like unavoidable tides. Yet there was something strange. Even amid the grime of the sidewalks, Elizabeth carried a crossword puzzle notebook. It was how she kept alive the memory of the student she'd once been. She scribbled with borrowed pens, tried to fill in the lines, and when she got one right, she smiled alone, as if some tiny piece of the girl who once dreamed of courtrooms still lived inside her. Still, the decline was obvious. Her body weakened, her teeth decayed, her skin bore marks. People hurried past, avoiding eye contact, as if Elizabeth were just another part of the landscape of poverty. And each day, she believed more firmly that this was all she was now, invisible, disposable, a walking mistake. But the dog licked her hand, and that simple gesture kept her from giving up completely. He reminded her that something in her life still depended on her. Still, the feeling of having hit rock bottom never left. Elizabeth no longer saw herself as someone who could be saved. The promising young woman was gone, all that remained was a survivor carrying her own ashes. Elizabeth didn't disappear entirely because, one day, the unexpected happened. She was walking down the street when she heard someone call her name, something rare, nearly forgotten. She turned and saw Michael, an old friend of Daniel's from his Marine days. The shock on her face was immediate. There was no way to hide how far she'd fallen. Worn clothes, hollow cheeks, lost eyes. Yet Michael didn't pull away. He stepped closer and said only, "You need help, and I know a place." And so, almost against her will, Elizabeth walked into a recovery center. At 38, she carried a life in ruins, with no money, no possessions, no credit, only shame. The first impact was brutal: strict rules, fixed schedules, living among strangers who, like her, were fighting their way out of the abyss. Every relapse seemed to confirm her fear that there was no salvation. But deep down, something began to shift. The days were long, filled with group conversations and small routine chores. Elizabeth listened as others told their stories of falling, and strangely, she saw reflections of herself in every one. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone in that desert. Some fell and came back, others celebrated weeks of sobriety. Between quiet tears and restrained laughter, she began to understand that every slip wasn't proof of final failure, it was just part of learning. The turning point came during a meditation session. The facilitator asked everyone to think of something they were grateful for. Elizabeth closed her eyes, and without planning it, a thought surfaced: "I'm sober right now." It hit her like lightning. She'd never paused to be thankful for being free, even if only for a moment, from the prison of addiction. For the first time, she felt the true weight of freedom. It wasn't just the absence of drugs, but the clarity of being alive and present. That realization opened the door to a deeper understanding. Her past scars could be seen not just as marks of pain, but as signs of survival. Elizabeth heard the term post-traumatic growth and recognized herself in it. She understood that trauma, no matter how devastating, could be transformed into strength. In that space of discipline and shared honesty, she began building something new. Still fragile, still unsure, but with a different seed planted inside her. A seed that, slowly, showed her maybe it was possible to write a new story, one that didn't have to end at the bottom of the well where she'd lived for so long. After rebuilding the foundations of her life, Elizabeth realized her journey carried something bigger than mere survival. What had begun as a desperate effort to stay sober became a mission. Every job she earned, every genuine friendship that formed, every small step forward became reminders that the past didn't have to be a prison. It was possible to rewrite your own story, not by hiding the scars, but by turning them into a beacon for others still struggling in the dark. The life lesson that emerges from her path is a call to anyone who listens. Elizabeth shows that dignity isn't lost forever, even when it seems buried under layers of shame and failure. Her life proves that resilience doesn't grow on easy days, it grows when everything falls apart. It was at the bottom of the well that she found the clarity that falling doesn't have to be the final chapter. This lesson isn't just hers, it's ours too. How many times have we given up too soon on someone, or on ourselves? How many stories could have a new beginning if there had been patience, support, or simply the belief that change is possible? Elizabeth helps us see that everyone we meet might be carrying an invisible battle. And even if we can't offer much, we can still offer presence, respect, and the conviction that no one is doomed to be defined only by the mistakes they've made. The message left behind is simple, and yet transformative: overcoming doesn't mean erasing the past, but learning to walk with it. Elizabeth chose that her identity wouldn't be marked by addiction, but by the courage to get back up. And that's something anyone can choose. Hearing her story invites us to reflect on our own lives. Maybe you're going through a hard time, or you know someone on the edge of giving up. Elizabeth's life proves that even ruins can become fertile ground for powerful new beginnings. And the deepest truth she leaves us with is this: no one is defined by their fall, but by the strength it takes to rise and keep moving forward. This channel is new and was created to share stories with life lessons, intense, filled with emotion and meaning, examples that will touch your heart and strengthen your mind. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video.